Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the hearings of the revocation of reserve status of Marine Park proposal. Unfortunately, our live stream is not working today, but the meeting will be recorded and posted online. If I can first of all call for apologies. We have just got Councillor Granger. I will move Councillor Granger's apology. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Curak. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against and carried. There is no chairperson's report. There are no late items. I'd like to now call, are there any declarations of conflict of interest on this item? There are none. If I can now pass over to Gary and Bridget to give us a briefing on the hearings process. This is somewhat different to our normal hearings. This is you're closer in relation to, say, like an RMA hearing than an annual plan hearing. It's a quasi-judicial process, and it's a hearing under the Reserves Act. So if I can now pass over to you to brief us on those aspects. Thank you.
Good afternoon. These hearings follow the public consultation regarding the intention to revoke the reserve status of an area of land at Marine Park Sulphur Point, which is to enable a potential long-term lease to the University of Waikato in order to establish a new marine research and education facility. A total 494 submissions were received during the consultation period, which occurred between 12 November and 14 December 2018. A further 4 submissions were received after the close of the consultation period, and I note a resolution is recommended within our report to accept and hear these late submissions. Of the 498 total submissions, 211 or 42 were in support of the revocation, 287 or 58% were against. Council staff have read all submissions and will listen to those submitters who are speaking today. We're obviously happy to answer any queries that may come to us via the committee. A deliberations report will be prepared in due course, with deliberations set to occur on the 3rd of July, which will allow some further time for consultation to occur with iwi and hapu groups. In considering submissions on whether to revoke the recreation reserve status of part of Marine Park, the Council is acting as the administering body under the Reserves Act. Now, the Reserves Act does not prescribe any particular matters that must be taken into account when considering submissions. The focus of deliberations should primarily be on the reserve land which is being lost and whether that loss can reasonably be justified, particularly in respect of its recreational attributes. And if Council, as administering body, makes a decision to proceed with the revocation, it will pass on to the Minister of Conservation to decide the matter. So that's my brief introduction to my paper. Happy to answer any queries at this time.
Any queries of Gary, colleagues? Councillor Clout.
Thanks very much, Gary and Bridget. Just a question. So, as we sit here, we are supposed to only look at issues relating to the reserve itself, whereas the submitters are going to be giving all sorts of pros and cons which relate to its potential use. So how are we supposed to reconcile those two potential conflicts?
It's obviously a difficult balancing act. It would be foolish to ignore the fact that the university proposal is there. Fundamentally, it is a consideration under that Reserves Act, so it is really looking at the reserve and its current uses, its, I guess, potential foreseeable uses in that area, and whether that loss can be reasonably justified. It's difficult to provide clear guidance on the matter. It is obviously difficult, but at the same time we can't consider that in isolation from the university project.
Yeah, just to add to that, when staff come back with a report ahead of deliberations, we'll endeavour to guide the council as the administering body in the key focus under the Reserves Act, acknowledging the relevant aspects of the submissions presented to council, but that report will really try to give guidance to the decision making at that time.
Bridget, do you wish to speak to any of the items as well?
Not at this stage. I really would just like to refer the committee to the key maps that are presented in the report around the location. There seems to have been, in some of the submissions received, a misunderstanding on the area we're looking at. So it's we are comfortable that we've been quite clear about the subject area in the public notice and public consultation that was undertaken, and it's set out in the report. We're happy to give more guidance over the course of the hearing if that's needed.
Any supplementary questions, colleagues? No. Okay, if I can now turn your attention to page 6 of our agenda. We have some recommendations there that we receive the submissions, agree to hear the submissions, and also accept and agree to hear the late submissions. Do I have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Malloy, seconded by Councillor Mason. Is there any discussion? No, I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, and that is carried. Right. Okay, our first submitter this afternoon is Councillor John Cronin from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Welcome, John. John's submission is on page 21 of your agenda.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, councillors. There, you happy if I sit down? Do it. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. It's a pleasure to come along and talk to you today about this reserve. As your staff just pointed out to you, there is a lot of misconception about the size of the reserve and the size of the revocation sought. But just to make it absolutely abundantly clear, the amount that the university is what we are supporting is a revocation of 6.18% of the reserve. That's the amount of the revocation that you're looking at. Right. Now this is a submission in support of, in relation to the reserve status of which is 6952 square metres or 6.18% of the marine reserve land for the purpose of this long-term lease to the new marine research and educational facility. Firstly, we as a council would like to congratulate Tauranga City for their support for the new University of Waikato-led tertiary campus in the CBD. We can recognise, even in such a short time, that it is a game changer, a crucial turning point in the region's future, and it will go down in history for its significant impact, both economic and social, within our region. The project is an example of the great change that can be achieved by working in partnership. It has been said before that Tauranga is sitting on the cusp of a positive future. We are also on the cusp of leading the way for international research recognition, which will underpin the city's economic future for generations to come. No other city or other university has this current opportunity. Bay of Plenty Regional Council has already submitted to the Tauranga City Council at an earlier hearing on this issue, and today we would again like to stress that the Coastal Marine Field Station has nowhere else to go in this city. Nowhere else to go in this city. Resultant of that hearing, that is resultant of that earlier hearing that we had, where a private club has been permitted to continue to use almost exclusively the only other suitable site in the area. And you will remember that hearing. Tauranga cannot and must not let this now, the only other remaining site, the subject of this submission slipped by. This is a unique opportunity, and together as a community, we submit that we need this facility here in our city. That's our city, yours and mine, Tauranga. The University of Waikato has had a substantial research presence in the Bay of Plenty for many years, and the Coastal Marine Field Station has been a significant part of this. Led by the world-renowned, and I mean that, world-renowned Chris Battershill, the field station hosts PhD and master's students who study a wide range of coastal and marine science courses. This links to undergraduate courses taught in aquaculture, ecology, and biodiversity and environmental sciences. Most recently, the field station received a substantial financial boost from the Tertiary Education Commission and the university itself an entrepreneurial universities grant. This will inject millions of investment into research, giving our region the opportunity to be a world leader in microalgal biotechnologies. That substantial funding, by its nature, brings funding to be spent in our community, so there is a huge economic benefit. Coastal Marines researchers will study the use of marine life to create aqua pharmaceuticals and aqua fertilizer products and lessen the reliance of land and plant-based products and fertilizers. So there is a big economic benefit to the country that could be lost. This could immensely improve New Zealand's clean green image, with Tauranga leading the way. The coastal field station is not just important to the University of Waikato and its research capability, but it's also crucial to the other members of the tertiary partnership, Te Ahoho Mai Institute of Technology and Te Whare Wananga o Nui Rangi. It's important to them. This tertiary partnership that we have here in Tauranga is unique to New Zealand and differentiates us from any other university or education facilities in New Zealand. The three institutions have students studying at different levels, from diploma to PhD, all using the facilities under the guidance of Professor Chris Battershill and from Professor Ian Hawkes. The fact that education is being offered at all levels within the field station is something not to take lightly in this submission. The field station can and is providing opportunities for all young people, giving them a chance to further their education here in the region. The field station is walking the talk. It's doing what it said it would do. It is not just fancy ideas. The more skilled that we can get our people to be will be the flow to a better economy, resulting in increased social well-being throughout our city and region. We should all aspire to this, and providing educational opportunities for our young and especially the underprivileged is absolutely core to this proposal. It is an action that both councils should be proud to facilitate. We do understand that some submitters against this proposal are concerned at losing amenity value from this relatively small area of green space sought. We would submit that with 93% of the whole area remaining as green space, i.e. for the public use, and with the TCC land being utilised by a private boating club, that the public use of green space is likely enhanced, taking into account consideration over both land areas. Our understanding is that the university is prepared to invest extra capital to ensure the public amenity is enhanced through mechanisms like public access to the aquaria and through extra landscaping, as well as the iconic nature of the building that they intend. We think that the benefit of is overwhelmingly in favour of this proposal. Not only are we able to facilitate economic advantage to our city, this proposal also provides a pathway to education for our young people. It makes real progress in improving our clean green image and helps in protecting our harbour, and is most likely would improve the amenity value of the whole area. We want to continue to work in partnership with you and with the university, just like we did for the tertiary campus and earlier the Marine Park at Sulphur Point, to make this another brilliant success for our city and region. This is a very, very special opportunity. We as a community cannot afford to lose this. We must strive to make it a reality. In closing, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council fully supports the proposal, and we respectfully ask Tauranga City to do the same, to support the proposal for the benefit of our community and for the benefit of our youth, and particularly the most disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cronin. There's the opportunity now for a question. Any questions from colleagues? No, that's reasonably straightforward. Thank you for the submission. On the 3rd of July, Council will be deliberating on the submissions that we've heard today. So thank you for the submission. Much
Through the
appreciated.
Chair, if I may,
Yes, you may,
I'd just
Councillor
like to
Lloyd.
congratulate Councillor Cronin on finishing right on time. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that. Right on the second, so well done.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Steve Hill from the Outrigger Canoe Club, and Steve's submission is on page 22 of our agenda. Is Steve Hill here? No. Final call. We'll see if we can fit him in later if he arrives. That then takes us to Douglas Sutton, who has requested to speak for 5 minutes. Douglas's submission is on page 16. Welcome, Douglas. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So, as our chair has indicated, I am Douglas George Sutton. I'm a beef farmer currently living and working in central Northland, and I have no conflict of interest at all in relation to the matter under discussion. I'd like to thank Mayor Brownless and councillors for receiving this presentation, which supplements a brief written statement I made via the council webpage in March. As to my qualifications for being here today, the first is that I participated in education and research related development projects in the Western Bay of Plenty during a 5-year period from 2006, throughout which I was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the University of Waikato. Then and subsequently, I have worked internationally in order to understand pathways by which education, research and innovation can be combined to increase economic resilience, prosperity and wealth creation in new cities around the world. This works in some instances and it fails conspicuously in others, and I've been trying to understand what succeeds and what fails. As to my conclusion, it is that a coastal and marine research station should indeed be built on Sulphur Point. I don't say this lightly, nor do I say this with any disrespect for those who may hold a different view. I want my submission to be recognised as reasoned and respectful both. My conclusion is based on the fact that a new council and marine research station on Sulphur Point would have 7 very powerful capabilities. It would develop a pipeline of world-class learning, from schools to diploma and degree education to practical research onto employment in coastal and marine fields here and elsewhere in the world. I believe that Intercoast demonstrated that. We had 80 PhD students came through that particular project, and their employment now reads like a star's almanac. They're employed all over the world in research and related positions. A brilliant success, thanks to Tauranga. Secondly, the Coastal and Marine Research Station would strengthen workforce development in the Bay, upskill local people, enrol very able students, and create employment, research, conference and seminar opportunities for people who are able and willing to contribute to business, to science and practical research here in the Bay. In terms of funding, the Coastal and Marine Research Institute would apply successfully for national and international funding in substantial sums to support its high-value research and also to support its equipment needs. Meeting those needs would benefit the Bay, while the meeting of those needs would be substantially funded from elsewhere. Not a bad financial tactic, I think. Fourthly, the Coastal and Marine Research Institute would act as a portal through which angel investors and others could consider seeding new business opportunities based on discoveries in coastal and marine habitats. Fifth, the Coastal and Marine Research Institute would contribute directly to key future-focused objectives which are set out now in Smart Growth and Tauranga Council and Western Bay Council documents, to which this council and other bodies, of course, have committed themselves. These include the Bay of Connections, the Maori Economic Development Strategy, the Smart Growth Future Development Strategy, the Environmental Strategy, a Community Wellbeing Plan, and also the research station would have the ability to contribute to the individual planning documents now being drawn together to form the Bay's seminal economic development and investment plan. Very importantly, the Coastal and Marine Research Station would give Tauranga and the Bay world-class ability to monitor change in coastal and marine habitats. We are now embroiled in a very dangerous and accelerating process of anthropogenic environmental change, and beachside cities should be aware of this and should prepare scientifically and in policy terms to take into account what is about to happen. So as we proceed further into the 21st century, a new Coastal and Marine Research Station able to make sense of regional climate change and sea level change vectors would be really good gear to have on your side. And we shouldn't underestimate the importance of this particular observation. It's suggested, of course, that sea level will rise 0.3 of a metre by 2060, and that will affect all areas of New Zealand's coast. So it is timely to have a research-powerful coastal and marine research station here. There's only really one other operational research station of this sort in New Zealand, and it's operating at about 1/3 of the capacity of the one here under discussion. These advantages, however, are location sensitive. They don't work everywhere. They would work should this research station be put in the city. Too far away from downtown, and public secondary and tertiary education will be compromised. I note the commitment of the University of Waikato to public education. Too far from the full range of coastal and marine habitats, and coastal and marine research gets less frequent and more expensive. And then there's the axiom, very expensively learnt by universities and other research institutes all over the world, who've built their research institutes and stations in isolated locations. And this axiom is that economic and social contributions are most powerfully, quickly and intelligently made from the crossroads of all forms of traffic, that is, when research institutes are in the city. I've had opportunities to visit numerous international instances of this, and I won't bore you with the details, but the axiom is true. We need capital to come into Tauranga, pick up discoveries made in the coastal and marine habitat and turn these into businesses. Capital is relatively easy to access if the research is being presented within the city, but much more difficult to access, as those who've had marine stations now closed at Portobello, in Kaikoura and elsewhere would tell you, if the research is undertaken elsewhere, away from the city. So I would strongly urge you to recognise the principle that putting the research station in the centre would help to ensure that discoveries made scientifically have an everyday chance of getting start-up support, and start-up new businesses is something that the Bay is famously keen on and successful with. The fifth thing that I should point out in terms of this location-sensitive argument is that teaching, learning and research fit for the 21st century thrive. They pick up strength, they pick up mana when they have ready access to people with bold ideas, with diverse skills and with powerful interests. So moving the Coastal and Marine Research Station away from the Durham Street Tertiary Campus, away from your brilliant port and away from your marvellous city would impede the conversational flow of ideas, would limit everyday collegiality and mentoring, and would obstruct the creation of joint projects. Coastal and marine projects belong to no discipline. Time's up, and I'm nearly out of words, I promise. And so you need this combination of disciplines for which you need proximity to the city. It is my view that Tauranga is fortunate to have the opportunity of positioning a coastal and marine research station in the city. That's really what we're talking about. Sulphur Point is in the city. Doing so incurs disadvantages, particularly in that 6.18% of the land on Sulphur Point available for recreation would be maybe lost to that purpose. However, that disadvantage has to be weighed against advantages which would otherwise be created. It's my view that these advantages are long-term, that they're thoroughly aligned with regional aspirations, including many of those the Council had signed on to, and that they're cumulative. These advantages benefit social, economic, demographic, recreational and environmental aspects of life in the Bay. Nothing misses out, including recreation. These advantages reach all age cohorts and communities within the Bay, and the Bay benefits, and more broadly New Zealand does also, which is important. Finally, these advantages create new social and economic opportunities while also strengthening environmental safeguards. For those reasons, I support the construction of a new coastal and marine research station on Sulphur Point as another strategic facility designed to contribute in collaboration with others to the creation of future benefits for the Bay and its peoples and communities. I'm sorry I ran over time. It's not my habit to run over time.
Thank you, Dr. Sutton. I've been to a few lectures which have been over time, so that's all right.
I've been at those lectures too.
Yes. Our next two submitters have not arrived, so I'm just wondering, are there any questions of Dr. Sutton? No, thank you, Dr. Sutton. We'll be deliberating on the submissions that we've received on the 3rd of July.
Thank you
Thank you very much. Is Steve Hill here from the Outrigger Canoe Club? No. I note Anne Pankhurst is not present. Daryl Fletcher? No. Jeff Canham? Sir, would you mind coming and taking a seat? You've been allocated 10 minutes for your submissions, which are on page 16 and 18, colleagues, of our agenda. As I say, you've been allocated 10 minutes. If you do finish earlier than that, there may be the opportunity for a few questions. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Jeff Canham. I'm an accredited parks recreation professional in New Zealand, and recently a certified international parks professional through the World Urban Parks Association. I'll look to summarise across my written submission, Mr. Chair. It's my submission that there's no crisis that necessitates either TCC or the university having to have this site. The proposal pretty much amounts to giving away a park to facilitate the best office accommodation site in Tauranga, which once it's gone will be lost forever. And in fact, most of the land will be lost to vehicle storage in complying with TCC's district plan. The kicker, though, across everything else is that you don't need to revoke the reserve land in order to effect the lease that is also amongst this. You could lease it now. You could have leased it last year under the Reserves Act. And it is curious why revocation is required as a part of that. With that precedent set, the revocation would be the thin end of the wedge for Marine Park. Over many decades, TCC have spurned a number of private and other interests coveting Marine Park, like this in part or in whole, and those people would come straight back to you, including the Marina Society, who have a strong view and a strong support for the proposal to revoke. Not by accident, I would suggest. The problem with freehold land is that it can be transacted. We don't have much environmental law in New Zealand, but what we do have is the Reserves Act. And once that land is revoked, you are making a pretty big change to everything that you've done through your policies to date. When coupled with TCC's existing decline of availability and quality provision of parks citywide, Marine Park needs to remain in its full entirety as a recreation reserve to support your citywide network. Even using benchmarking alone, you're trailing behind, and add to that TCC's previous proclivity to ridding itself of reserves, selling them or removing designation means you're going against the worldwide trend for livable cities. It's my submission that TCC should cease this consideration of revocation process, and it hasn't been fully optioned to date. In my view, that places elected members and TCC in a higher risk scenario with proceeding with revocation. TCC hasn't been successful in the past with revocation, and typically councils are not. You have other tools available to you which you have not received good advice in using them instead of this poorly optioned process. TCC should decline the proposal to revocate part of Marine Park for its own benefit. There are a number of other factors around why we have parks. They're a litmus test for democracy and societal performance. To deny this community a large park for all the reasons it brought it about and all the reasons it has protected it over the years does fly in the face of, I believe, the community and council's very social licence to operate. TCC has previously declined the Port, the Marina Society, sports clubs, a commercial boat stacker, and even the University of Waikato previously, and has had a long record of protecting Marine Park. TCC wasn't prepared to divulge the previous information to support councillors in present day as to the rationale for previously declining this, and now it's in the position of having to argue the case in a high risk and expensive reserve revocation process. If I was advising you politically, it would be probably the last process you'd want to take on so close to a local body election. TCC hasn't articulated commensurately the community values and any reason it believes that these have changed, or made a full disclosure to the university nor the public regarding the presence of environmental values at site, be they nesting penguins, nor the presence of underground infrastructure that precludes building at the site per TCC's own district plan. TCC is potentially embarking on a statutory process in the weakest position, in my view, and one where most councils fail at great cost and great loss of political support from your constituents. The public haven't requested this revocation, and in my view, it's the highest risk approach you can take at this time. In terms of a summary, and I'm careful not to rely on technical evidence because this isn't that process, but believe me, you'll get people like me if you choose to proceed. TCC haven't informed the public of the full aspects of what's proposed, and I would suggest not advised elected members as to those nor the impacts. There's been no recreation assessment and little technical evidence supplied to inform TCC elected members. It has not been articulated to the public what TCC's other options are instead of those suggested, and this has been posed to elected members to date as some kind of no other options result. And it's not supported by full consideration of risk, infrastructure or community impact, and inaccurately states there will be no environmental impact. The assumptions are incorrect as they've been reported to you, including some pretty poorly supported claims that Marine Park is the only suitable location for the development of the Waikato University facility, which already has one pretty nearby anyway. The other assumptions are incorrect around the fragmentation of the park will have no great impact on the overall function of the park itself, and that the proposed condensed area will have the ability to provide the same benefits as the park as it is in its original state. And also that there's no harm to habitat, with DOC and others recognising, and in fact this very council recognising, that above mean high water spring you have a site of little blue penguin nesting. I won't go through all your own policies, that's a body of evidence for another day. However, there's a range of information that I could quote from TCC's own work, community mandate and policy around the requirement for Marine Park. You do have a shortage of reserve space. You have an increasing pressure on it due to your increasing population growth. You have existing policies and strategies in place which permit and require you to address these pressures. I won't go into the way you benchmark against the country, and I won't go into the economic value of reserves and how this is an economic issue as much as an environmental or social one. In terms of the benefits of parks, I think that's not today. I could pitch that all day long, it's what I do. I think though the community can see themselves in your parks, and it's why they move here. When you look at the vital signs information that probably provides your best anecdotal evidence from your community, you'll see why people are coming to this area based on what they believe will be provided to them and what they are supporting in their investment through rates. We haven't heard from a number of people to date, and it would appear that actually TCC is also the applicant as well as the governor and manager, controlling and managing authority in this situation. If there is time, I can take you through all sorts of things that, if I were you, I'd want to really know. But it's interesting, Waikato University already has a marine research facility at Sulphur Point, which it still uses. Alongside that, TCC is experiencing a severe decline in what you can provide your community despite being in a growth phase. And reminding ourselves that this park was set aside as a result of the public being concerned about loss of recreation opportunity when the port was being dredged. There was a real fear that the reclaimed area at that time would be exclusive to marine or port activities and with no equity of access for public recreation to the same area. Marine Park was protected as a reserve for that reason, not by accident. Many development-minded motivations have tried to undo this public land for their own means. This is one of many. Private interests do periodically covet this land, approximately every 5 years or so, but simply because it's a beautiful place, for the same reasons that it's a great park, people desire it for their own needs. And that's why when it was created in a developing city, it was set aside, and our city is still developing. It's incredible that a university that has one of the best faculties for sport and recreation and park advocacy is alongside TCC looking to revoke a recreation reserve and affect a little blue penguin habitat for the sake of a new building and facilities and building prime office location, doing that in a prime location in the face of all the other options and the nearby facility. It's at complete odds with the university's own position on these sectors and the environment. And there are many other locations nearby. As such, successive councils and community processes have been here before and have protected this area. Once again, TCC need to hold the line and not succumb to losing this public land forever, because forever is a very long time. There is even a false story now being circulated that it was never set aside for the public. I haven't extended to a Lagorma request to waste staff time on finding out the very information you already possess. that led you to protect it in the past. But it's curious that that position is now being asserted and promulgated at this very time. If anything, the park needs more protection, not less, and this should be a result of this process since it has been raised in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your submission, Mr. Canham. If I can just ask a question around the lease of land under the Reserves Act. In a recreational reserve or one of the city's sporting areas, you've got, of course, rugby clubs, tennis clubs, bowling clubs, which all occupy reserve land. How consistent would a university or other education facility be, in your view, with a Reserves Act designation?
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's a potentially long technical answer, but your own reserve management plan process should have dealt with that. It should have dealt with how the primary purpose for that reserve was correct or otherwise, and that is the first step in enabling a lease situation if that was the outcome of that democratic process. Actually, it's up to the public to decide what they believe the primary purpose of that reserve is. This is actually the wrong process. In terms of the Reserves Act, you should actually be looking at your reserves management plan first and going through a public process that deals with this in its entirety with the other issues that the public see as values of that reserve, other than leaving it to a process such as this, where, as we've seen today, a lot of submitters work, I should be, and they're not able to come to these in isolation of the full Reserves Act process for managing reserves as you are the controlling and managing authority. What I would also say is that I think technically and with respect to other acts, I think you've got some other things to consider, not just revocation, but that's for another day.
Thank you. Appreciate the submission. Colleagues, do you have any further questions? No. There being none, thank you for the submission, Mr. Canham. We'll be deliberating on the 3rd of July and be taking into consideration the points that you've raised. Our next submitter, colleagues, is Mr. Mark Bell. Mr. Bell, you're here? Fantastic. So the 10 minutes is yours to use as you wish, but if you finish earlier, there may be an opportunity for some questions. So thank you, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mayor, CE. My name's Mark Bell. I'm a keen fisherman, Tauranga resident for the last 25 years. I was interested to hear what the last two speakers said, and I'm behind them that I'm 100% for a marine research facility, but it's the location. Why ask the location? It's a green area, designated as a green area, and it should stay as a green area for the people of Tauranga, not as a commercial. The city, as we all know, is growing very fast, and so is the boating industry. When I came here 25 years ago, the average trailer boat was about a 16-foot trailer boat on a 4-cylinder car. Now, if we saw a big boat those days, we looked twice. Now the average boat is 7 metres plus, has a parking area requirement of around 20 metres, weighs about 3 tonnes, and costs from a 7 metre to an 8.5 metre boat $170,000 to over $400,000 now. This is what the people that are coming to Tauranga want to do, and that's what they're towing, and they need somewhere to park. On Easter Saturday, you've got some photos there of how busy it was down there. There was no parking left. They were parking right down to the railway station, railway crossings. There was nowhere for anyone to come, and my fear is, as the boat market's growing very, very quickly, we are running out of room to park. Even though it is a recreational area, it needs to keep as a recreational area. Fishing dollar spend is $1 billion industry according to government. And I would suggest if you put the price of boats on that, it would go way greater. Local boat builders, Bay of Plenty, Waikato, Wakatani area, you've got Surtees, Extreme, Marco, Everyman, Kingfisher, Senator, to name a few. They're all contributing to our local economy. You've got the jet ski market is absolutely huge. If any of you drove down Hewlett's Road before Christmas, you would have seen a mountain of jet skis ready to the market. Where are they going to park? There's going to be nothing worse, as I said in my submission, as mum and dad going down midday on a beautiful summer's day, nowhere to park, having to go home. What I don't think a lot of people do realise, for a large trailer boat, there is no other safe launching area in Tauranga for a large trailer boat. There is nothing. You can't launch at the Furt Works because you can't get under the bridge. You can't launch at downtown Mount. We all know what that's like in the summer. There is no other safe boat parking. The only other place you could put in is Omokoroa, Snodgrass Road. Those places aren't suitable. Ferguson Park isn't suitable. There is no other place. So we can imagine how quick and how huge the trailer boat market's getting. Where are the people going to use our harbour? Our harbour is an asset to Tauranga, and that's why I'm so pleased we've got the marine research wanting to come over here, and they'll help look after the harbour, because that is our greatest asset, both for recreation and for commercial. Big events. They state Area 2, which is the overflow park. Area 2 would be the overflow parking area and for events. Well, as you see on a fine day, that's already full. So where could we have an event? We need that whole area. This year they had the Big Four down there, which is the shooting with game birds and venison and pigs. That was chocker down there. You couldn't move. You couldn't get down to the Coast Guard. It was that busy. So to lose that will be, as a couple of the last speakers, gone forever. I know also the marina has got plans for extension. That will be another matter that would come up. As I said, I haven't got too much to say, but at the end of the day, please, please keep our reserve area down there for our future people. We need it. We need the Marine Studies Unit, but please think of somewhere else to put it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Councillor Baldock.
Thanks, Mr. Bell. It just does seem to me that your primary objection is one of parking for trailer boats or trailers.
Well, it's keeping a green area green and location, how it would interfere with it.
But if it's covered with vehicles and trailers, it's kind of losing its use as a green area as well.
I think it's still classed for parking as a recreational area. We're not saying the cars are going to be there every day of the week, but there are times on a Saturday and a Sunday, public holiday, it is busy down there.
You're exactly right, it is. But at some point, with a growing city like this, we will hit capacity. We will have to find somewhere else, or we will just be chock-a-block, won't we?
But that's the trouble, where else is there that it won't perhaps have a worse effect? Ferguson Park, don't think that would ever happen. Because, again, it's safe launching. Big boats, nearly 3 tonnes, some of them. We need safe, well, the fishermen need, and the boaties need safe launching. Thank you.
Councillor, we've just got one further question from Councillor Robson.
Yeah, it's following on from the question of my colleague, Councillor Larry Baldock. Am I correct in understanding that you're saying there is no other place within the city that you can safely launch these boats, but you believe there are other places in the city where this marine research station could be built? Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell, for the submission. It brought back some memories of my dad towing a 7-metre Crestacraft with a 1.6 litre Toyota Corolla back in 1984, and I can't imagine how the heck he did it, especially going over the hill to Rotorua. Thank you. Our next submitter is Mr. Jim Beard. Mr. Beard, are you here, present? Jim Beard, thank you. Mr. Beard's submission, colleagues, is on page 25 of your agenda. Mr. Bed, you've requested 5 minutes. If you finish slightly before that, there may be an opportunity for some questions from my colleagues. Thank you.
Right, just to make it clear, I am objecting to your proposal to change the recreation reserve into a use for a business. Nobody is objecting to the university expanding its business in Tauranga. The minority haven't given any indication why they should be using the recreation reserve. The majority are objecting to giving the recreation reserve to the university when there is no reason to do so. When you agreed to work for the university to find land for the marine facility, you were putting the interests of a business ahead of the interests of the city residents. The university asked for land close to the city centre. They didn't ask for land down at Sulphur Point. You are the people who made the decision to use land at Sulphur Point. It is obvious that your decision would lead to a conflict of interest with the public. Nobody has explained why the facility has to be on the reserve land at Sulphur Point. Surely the university has the talent to produce world-class research without having a building on public land. The university obviously thinks so. It is you councillors who want to use the recreation reserve. In my opinion, this contravenes the requirement for councillors to make decisions in the public interest. You've previously selected 2 sites as the best available. They were down at the northern end. You discarded them because they affected parking for boat trailers. If you proceed to use the recreation reserve, then you are deciding that one class of use is better than another. Once again, in my opinion, this contravenes the requirement for councillors to make decisions that give fairness to all. Information provided by council for public consultation is unsatisfactory. For example, it is biased toward the university. The advantages are copied from the university's leaflet. The benefits do not require that the facility be on public land. There is no need to give up recreation land to increase the international profile of Tauranga, if that's going to happen at all. There are 3 universities offering marine research. There is no proof that another is necessary, at a loss of an irreplaceable resource to Tauranga residents. The information providing is misleading. The implication that 7,000 square metres is only 6% of the reserve is misleading. This land is the last open green space at Sulphur Point. You will be taking half of this for the university and for parking. That is about 12% or 1/8 of the total reserve. It is not the responsibility of the City Council to protect the marine environment. That is the responsibility of the Regional Council. You haven't bothered to list any of the disadvantages of your proposal. That has been left up to 289 respondents. That is something that you have been paid to do. No impact report was provided, but you have found time to have a title plan surveyed. I'd like to repeat, you have not given the reasons that the recreation reserve is the only available site. Previous speakers this afternoon have mentioned that there is sufficient capital that the university can access. Let them go out and buy land like any other business would be required to do. If you proceed, you will be acting as the first stage of the university's fundraising by giving them land worth more than $3.66 million. There are many other disadvantages which are covered in the submissions. I agree with all of them. The information by Sue Foster for the dog training class is an excellent summary. My submission is that the reserve land at Sulphur Point is left as reserve land and that you stop working for the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. Are there any questions, colleagues, of the submission? No, there being none, thank you, Mr. Beard, for the submission. We'll be deliberating on what we've heard on the 3rd of July. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Simpson here? Is Phil Simpson here? No. There must be a traffic jam on the cycleway. So the next submitter up is Mr. Ron Pinkham. Ron, are you here, sir? Fantastic. Mr. Pinkham, you've requested 10 minutes. If you finish slightly before then, there may be the opportunity for some questions, but otherwise the time is for you to use as you see fit. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and have a bit of a talk to you guys. Give you a little bit of history about me. I've been director of a number of companies since about 1982. I worked on the original reclamation when it was there, and I'm quite familiar with what the piece of land in question at Sulphur Point was set aside for. It's interesting to hear some of the submissions, and hopefully you as our trusted elected representative will consider these submissions objectively and without bias. That's important. The real issue should not be should the University of Waikato be in Tauranga. Everybody accepts the fact that it would be a great idea to have something like that here. But whether recreational public reserve should be reclassified to accommodate a commercial venture. Simple. No? So before we get to this point, I would have expected, firstly, there should have been a comprehensive and independent study done to ascertain the future requirements of the recreational users of the land in question at Sulphur Point, as this is what the land was originally set aside for. I think you've neglected to actually consult constructively with the existing users to find out what they wanted for the future. It's been evident from the onset there's been a great deal of misinformation publicised about all this, and somewhat confusing in some issues. The building size that they want to put up, the number of people on the site, the plans, the parking, water quality, that's beside the point. Proposed financial gain or the benefits of the people of Tauranga. But unfortunately, these statements have been very vague, publicised, without proof or figures that can be actually substantiated. It's kind of just somebody mentions a number and everybody goes, oh, that sounds good. With this half-baked approach, the Tauranga City Council expects the people of Tauranga to get on board with this. Kind of a bit confusing for me. You, the elected members, can only make the decision on the information that is supplied to you in a credible and complete and accurate manner. Not on conjecture, not on guesswork. So far what I've seen is doubtful that this is actually happening. I wish to bring the attention also of the elected members that the intended use of the land west of the railway, whole complete land west of the rail line, at the time of reclamation by the Bay of Plenty Harbour Board in 1981, was to establish a marine facility for the recreational marine users as an alternative site and remove the old facilities from both the Strand and over by the fertiliser works to enable the bridge to be built. A lot of clubs and organisations starting as far back as 1982 have been establishing a presence at Sulphur Point in a manner of which this was intended. These clubs have spent a lot of time and fundraising to develop the facilities and have had the services supplied that are currently there. Now, they raised money to put those services in. The clubs have been progressively developing the facilities over a period of time as the finances can permit. It is always going to be a slow process, and now some of these establishments need serious upgrading, so more fundraising money is going to have to come forward to turn around and achieve this. Now the Tauranga City Council needs to do their bit and get on board and support these clubs and organisations and then continue to see that the Sulphur Point develops in a way which it was intended. So I ask you to consider the future of Sulphur Point. The potential is far bigger than just leasing off the piece of land for a few pieces of silver to a commercial venture like the Waikato University. It's a bit unfortunate, they're caught in the middle of this. I've spoken to a large number of marine wholesalers and retailers and service-related industries in the Greater Bay of Plenty in the Waikato area, right as far as Swayas, Taupo, Morrinsville, Hamilton. All those I spoke to have indicated that the last 3 to 5 years, the sales have increased 15 to 30% each year in leisure boat sales and support. Don't take my word for it, it's statistics, it's available. All these areas service the Tauranga area, and this increase is now putting a heavy load on an already limited facilities presently at Sulphur Point. On a good day, we'll go back to the parking. There's no need to make a big car park. It's already there. It's a big grass area. All right? We've got C3 there. They are now taking up a lot of the south end car parking. You've now got the University of Waikato there. They're taking up a lot of that. They're doing that during the week. During the weekend, you can't move there. You can't move. On a bad day, the space is often available is only Keith Allen Drive. Right, this is fast becoming a serious safety hazard, and it's really bad. I got to watch one of the Wakarama people get knocked over by a car carrying the fiberglass boat on the top of their shoulder. They shouldn't be put in that situation. The average boat and trailer combination needs 15 to 17 metres. I run a vehicle that runs it just on 20 odd metres down to Sulphur Point. You'll find me down there any day of the week, and I'm running around the road with something like about 7.5 tonnes. That's what I do. Several times there's been no space available to park a vehicle or boat trailer, and people have just turned around and just gone away somewhere else. Right? The University of Waikato on that site is only adding to this problem that we've got at the moment, the congestion. The situation is not uncommon during the service months and cascade over to create a backlog on the overloaded boat ramps. With the delay and the vehicles being brought in to clear the ramps from some distance away up Keith Allen Drive and even as far away as Crossroads down by the fishing factory, by Sanford's. The question I ask for you is, do some homework on it. Has a study been done to ascertain what the recreational users of Sulphur Point want or require in the long term? I've spoken to many people of the ramps, and I was quite surprised at some of the very good ideas that would be worth taking a serious look at. Some of the submissions have been put here have got some really, really good ideas and some smart stuff. Put it together, make it work. Has the Tauranga City come down to such a survey and all this taken into account, all the aspects of the future requirements of recreational use of Sulphur Point? This should have been the top priority before it was even thought of to turn around and lease it off to a commercial venture. So now's the time to get real with it. Sulphur Point is fast becoming close to saturation point. It is fast becoming close to saturation point. And as you say, Councillor, when it's full, it's full. Okay? We've got the same problem at Amakara, and that is the only other 24-hour, 7-day week launching facility that we have in Tauranga. My boat won't fit under the Bridge Street Marina Bridge. No way near it. Not more many others. The piece in question is popular and would be more so if the fence that was put up around it a couple of years ago was removed and the people were given back the access they previously were entitled to. In case you weren't aware, there's actually no wheelchair or pushchair access to this reserve other than either end, down by the boat club and up by the compass. They're the only two access points. When I inquired about it, why the fence was being erected, I was informed that it was to prevent the hoons that were doing wheelies on it. And I'm going, what? This is a classic case of draining the swamp when the problem was really just alligators. Security cameras would have been far more calling. Also, I noticed on the new long-term plan that all the capital expenditure for Sulphur Point has just disappeared. So I kind of wonder what other motive was involved, or I don't believe in coincidences. To propose and reject it, the proposal to remove the recreation reserve status and allow the University of Waikato or any other commercial venture to establish a presence on this piece of land will fragment the existing usage, stall further development and restrict future development, parking and recreational use. I would like to suggest that for the elected members to call for an independent and impartial study to be done on the future requirements from all the affected recreational users at Sulphur Point. Not just Sulphur Point Marinas or the Yacht Club. We're talking about all the users. We're talking about you, and you. Establish a long term for the development of all the land and facilities of the western side of the rail line at Sulphur Point, and to reject any request to have any of this land reclassified until this is completed. I'm passionate about Sulphur Point, you probably gathered that. And I find it a great place to visit. It's a vibrant field with a good relationship between the ports of Tauranga. They are marvellous to deal with. The clubs, the individual users. So let's get on the development way at which was originally intended. Nobody is saying the Waikato University should not be in Tauranga. We're saying this is not the place to put it smack bang in the middle of that green space. It is a large piece of ground. It's not just 8 point whatever it is % of it. It is a third of that big green lawn that you see there, which was once a BMX track. Sulphur Point has much potential and needs a serious thought and attention to make it a great place that people want to visit. Lastly, I see the red flags come up. So lastly, think Wellington. Okay, 30 years ago it was a dirty, dingy, horrible place. I'm sure advertising about Wellington, what did you turn around and you see? You saw the Oriental Bay Fountain. Now what do you see? You turn around and you see the waterside with all those little sheds that are there and everybody going down to enjoy Te Papa. Beautiful. That was done with consultation with what the stakeholders and the people wanted to use that particular piece of waterfront for. Why aren't we doing the same? You know? We already have the theme at Sulphur Point. We now need to get the right people on board with the development skills and consult objectively with the recreational users and clubs and organisation and collectively formulate a workable plan moving forward. I urge you now to reject any decision to apply to the Minister of Conservation to remove the recreational status from any part of Sulphur Point until the true future requirements of the recreational use of Sulphur Point has been firmly established. It's known as Sulphur Point Marine Park for a reason. Eventually we're going to end up by having to turn around and put a charge on the use at Sulphur Point for the boat ramp facilities and the parking facilities. But that's something else if anybody wants to talk to me about when I've done some research on Marlborough Sounds and Napier and a few other places of how they've turned around and gone about it, and eventually this is something that's going to happen here. I won't detain you anymore. I say thank you very much for your time. If anybody wants some of this research that I've done on what's going on down at Sulphur Point, I'm quite happy to turn around and make it available to anybody. So thank you very much, folks, and I'll leave you to it.
Thank you for the submission. We're slightly ahead of time, so we've got time for a question. Councillor Malloy.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for that. It's a difficult one. Ron, where could the university go, one? And two, we're going to quickly grow out of room for marine activity right in the city. Where else can we go there? So two questions.
As I understand it from some of the stakeholders that are already down there, some of the landowners down there have already offered the University of Waikato alternative places. They've already offered them alternative facilities.
Okay, thank you. And the other? And the other question, like where in the future are we going to be able to put more marine facilities for the likes of yourselves?
That's a difficult one because this is the only facility you've really got is at Sulphur Point and, as I said, at Mokarawa. I understand the Western Bay is also turning around and doing a big study at the moment of what's required at the Mokarawa. That's the only other 24-hour, 7-day launching facility that we've got. We've got a phenomenal growth. We've all seen the jet skis out there doing laps around the island and all sorts of things. So these sort of things, as Tauranga is growing, we're getting a lot more of this and a lot more of this and a lot more of this. We're not accommodating it. It's just like, we've got Sulphur Point boat ramp. You get 30 jet skis sitting at Sulphur boat ramp and you've got cars for Africa trying to get in and out of Sulphur Point. So eventually what is going to happen is it's going to get saturated and there will have to be other alternatives to turn around and sort, whether it be somewhere like Ferguson Park or whatever the case may be. But at the moment, we've only got Sulphur Point and Amokara, and they're the only two we've got.
Got a question from Councillor Mason as well.
Hi,
Just
Ron.
to your
Thanks
left.
for your presentation. I was just wondering why you're calling the proposed university research facility a commercial venture.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Why are you putting it commercial? It's done for monetary gain, so it has to be a commercial venture. They charge a fee. It's a commercial venture. Having worked for research organisations in the past and been involved in research organisations before, it's not done for nothing. It's not done gratis. There has to be some financial transaction taking place. They charge a fee for their students. They charge a fee to turn around and do the research. The people that pay that fee to do the research own that research. So it's a commercial venture.
Final question from Councillor Baldock.
Thanks, Ron. You've said several times we only have this and Mokoroa as launching places, but they're the only ones that are developed now. But,
That is correct, sir.
but what we need to investigate is, are there any other locations within the harbour where we could put in the facilities for further launching?
Yes,
Are you aware of other potential sites?
Off the top of my head, I could think of a number of places which could be done, and one is under the Harbour Bridge, another one's down by Sanford's, but unfortunately what's happened now with that complex that's all filled up there, that's kind of restricted that as well. So yes, there is definitely options available. Yep, yep. Where the new travel lift is, and just incidentally, that's an amazing setup. That's totally amazing. But under the Harbour Bridge, you've got a little beach there, you've got Bridge Street Marina. Facilities could be made available there.
Thank you for the submission and answering those questions. Our next submitter, folks, is William Mitchinson. Is Mr. Mitchinson here? Sir, you've requested 5 minutes, and that is your time to use as you wish. If you do finish a little bit early, there may be an opportunity for some questions from my colleagues.
Councillors, Mr Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. My name's William Mitchinson. I'm a member of the Tauranga Marina Society, have been for close to 40 years now, since actually before the Marina Society or the Marina was thought of. But I presume you've had my other submission, which I put in, and thank you. And that outlines my qualifications to make comment on this matter. My request to speak is to background the reclamation formation and the development of the marina, marine park and container port areas, which I have personally been involved in. All were constructed under Specific Empowering Act legislation, the Bay of Plenty Harbour Board Sulphur Point Vesting and Empowering Act 1981, by the Bay of Plenty Harbour Board, consulting with 3 members berth holder committee, of which I was one. The marine park was reclaimed by the surplus dredging material from the marina, vested in Tauranga City as a reserve contribution for the port development. The Tauranga Marina Society proposed a marina extension and location for the university marine facility to provide for their boat requirements, and also a waiting list which we have for 250 berths. You'll see there is a correction on my thing. We had 300 berths, but the 300 berths included trailer yachts, people which occupy our hard stand area, so it's 250. The council proposed that the university site prevents the marina extension physically and economically and divides the park for any future proposal. Tauranga Marina Society have another proposed accommodation of Council's proposed university site in the middle of the marine park, with approximately a 30% reduction of the berths, which I believe is uneconomic. Tauranga Marina Society is an incorporated society of members, being berth holders, formed in conjunction with the Bay of Plenty Harbour Board and licensed to manage the marina, resulting in reportedly one of the most affordable marinas in the world. This society and management were unique in marina history and has now been followed in other developments. Tauranga Marina only proceeded by 178 paid-up berth holders, principally from Tauranga Yacht and Powerboat Club, by the chairman of the Bay of Plenty Harbour Board, Sir Bob Owens. The Bay of Plenty Harbour Board resolution required 200 paid up, or the reclamation land was for container port purposes. I add that we are very fortunate to have it. It was lucky to happen. I was Commodore of the Tauranga Yacht and Powerboat Club and requested the Bay of Plenty Harbour Board set aside a site for a new clubhouse at the marina in recognition of the future harbour bridge of limited waterway height and a loss of moorings for yachts. I believe the Tauranga Marina Society proposal of marine extension is forward-thinking and practical for this expanding city as a valuable asset. The project is constructed at no cost to ratepayers and has no profit and is a non-profit public facility. This berth facility contrasts with Council's trailer boat developments provided by ratepayers to the users at no cost. It's not that I'm against trailer yacht or trailer boat use of these facilities. We agree with it as well. For the Tauranga Marina Society, I believe the councils also with the Tauranga Yacht and Powerboat Clubs, and Mr. Batchelor, our solicitor, had submissions on the Tauranga Reserves Management Plan on the 12th of August 2016. Briefly, these proposed the existing Tauranga Marina land area becomes a designated reserve. Both submitters requested hearings and to be heard. Neither submitter have received replies or outcomes. Copies of these submissions are attached. The Tauranga Marina Society submit that this reserve of the Tauranga Marina would be in mitigation of the extension's berth area proposed. I'm happy to answer any questions pertaining to my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchinson. Are there any questions from colleagues? So, sir, just a question from me. So, the thrust of your submission is that you would like a revocation to move further south on that green space site towards where the existing boat ramps are, and that you would like to see is it the car park basically turned into a reserve under the Reserves Act? You know, further north on the peninsula. Is that correct?
No, not just that. The entire land area, including the car parks, buildings, everything, and including the yacht club site and the reserve area alongside it. But it is the total area up there, and I would also include a hard stand area in it as well, to ensure that it is a protected piece of land that couldn't be used for other purposes. I mean, there are plenty of instances where things happen on reserves, but there's a lot happening on this reserve. 27 things, I think, we thought of.
Thank you for your submission and background as well. We'll be deliberating in July and we'll come to a decision there after considering all the submissions, so thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we're going to adjourn now until our next submitter is at 20 to 4, so we'll just adjourn until 20 to 4. Thank you. recording. Okay, colleagues, we'll reconvene. Our next submitter is Mr. Andrew von Dardelson. Mr. von Dardelson, are you representing the regional council in
I'm
any way? Or?
representing myself.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good as gold. Well, I'll still give you the honorific councillor, von
Thank-
Dardelson.
Thank you. Do I stay seated in this
You may
format?
sit, stand, but the main point is the next 5 minutes is your time to
Okay,
use
we
as
won't
you wish.
take that too long. Let's just check. Now, listen, I did submit in your annual plan on this, and that's just a copy of when I came and spoke to you. I think I spoke to you. This Coastal Research Institute is a huge asset to the city. We cannot afford to lose it. Professor Chris Battersall is he's actually a gem, and we would be just so remiss if we lose him from this city. The Marine Research Station gives us opportunities for aquapharmaceutical and fertilisers, as well as your marine aquaculture farming and all sorts. The wealth that we hold in the Bay of Plenty, according to Professor Battersall, is immense. And we were just so blessed that he was there at the time of the RENA, and he served us so well, and it just shows what we can do and to even think about losing this would be a catastrophe. So I urge you all to forget the last 8 people that have spoken to you. I call them the naysayers. I see there's 8 in a row that's been before me saying get rid of it, but most of them have got vested interests of some form, and don't listen to a word of it. Trust me. Look, when we came to the long-term plan, I said, let's get some vision and defeat the naysayers. And I'm saying it here again today. This is easy for you. One of the naysayers, they question the loss of green space. Look, I'm a great believer in green space, so don't get me wrong on that. And we can mitigate that some other way. But don't block this because of that, and don't block this because one of your submitters lives in Harbour Drive and wouldn't like to see something spoiling his views slightly. Won't make any difference. Don't block this because the yachting community and the fishing community want more space for their boats. I've been an owner of a yacht on that marina, and nothing is at risk there. This is a very sensible place to put this facility, and the potential for it is absolutely huge. Be pragmatic, just get on with it. What else do I have? It said it's going to reduce some of the submitters saying it's reducing the options for extending recreational marine facilities. Balderdash, you know it, I know it. You've already put in a high-rise apartment building and commercial buildings in this area. This fits in with what we want. We're not talking about taking up too much space. There's no cost to TCC. It's a regional development that we can't afford to miss out on. You only have to look at the $5 million that Bremen University in Germany alone brought into this community. It's all win-win for us. So please do it. And while I'm, just before I finish, I've still got a minute anyway, throw out the late submissions. When submitters like Forest and Bird submit on the 6th or the 5th, when we all had to do it in December, they're far too late. If they're a day or so late, listen to them. But that is a nonsense that you'll be hearing them. And Bain McDonald's another one, in April, submitting then. I don't know if you're going to hear them or not. I don't know if you made that decision, but you shouldn't take any account of those submissions. They're far too late and absolutely ridiculous. Listen, get your head out of the sand if it's in the sand. Get on the ship, even if it might be the RENA, Let's get this thing done and dusted. Show that you're a progressive council. This will be your legacy if you do it. Look, the university is a huge asset to us all. We're going forward as a city. Let's keep it going. Don't get hung up by the previous 8 speakers who have been saying no to this. And I mean, for a speaker coming later, the Western Bay Mayor speaking against it, it just, tell him to get back into his own patch when he comes along. This is our patch. This is your patch. Time's up. Please support this. This is huge.
Thank you, Councillor Von Dalton. A question from Councillor Malloy.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for one of your impassioned deliveries. Going back, 6 speakers, not the 8, but 6, was a Dr. Douglas Sutton, who was a strong advocate for the university. You say we shouldn't take any notice of him?
Was he speaking in favour of this?
Yes.
Oh, that's good, as long as you... I went through a list and put the no's against them. It looked like there were going to be 8 no's before I got there. That was all.
Sorry, that wasn't a serious question.
Thank you. Councillor Mason and then Councillor Robson.
Andrew, you spoke about the RENA and the contribution that the research facility and especially Chris Battersall did. Would you like to just expand on that a little bit more from a regional council perspective?
It was huge because we had that facility in its form that it is today. They were able to get straight on as soon as that ship hit the reef. Chris Battersall and his team started surveying the seabed before the oil got to us, so that we knew what the status was before, and that allowed to have really good ongoing research because we had a base to work from, and his research, and it's gone on since. I mean, you'll know the figures of the number of PhD graduates that have come out of there already. It's a game changer, and please don't. This is for the whole region. It's not just for Tauranga. It's for the whole Bay of Plenty that runs up to the Kermadec Trench, where there's so much potential under there that we haven't yet tapped in minerals and pharmaceuticals. That we need we need good information, and we are getting it thanks to what we've got now. Don't lose it. That's all I say.
Councillor Robson, is it very brief?
Thank you, Andrew. I think you made the statement, no cost to TCC.
Yeah.
Replacing the land, if that was to be
There's
the
no
case.
cost in your decision today. Your decision today is to take it out of the reserve. That's your decision today, so there's no cost in that.
Okay, that's the clarification
Yeah.
I'm seeking.
Yeah, so when you make your decision today, it will be at no cost to TCC.
There is no decision today.
Well,
clarification.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Von Dalton. We, of course, will hear and listen to your submission as we do all submissions, and we'll be giving consideration to them and the late submissions and deliberating on the 3rd of July.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jerry Hodgson. Jerry Hodgson, no stranger to the Tauranga City Council chamber, a councillor from 1974 to 1980, I believe. So you've got 10 minutes, Mr. Hodgson, to use as you wish. If you finish earlier, there may be the opportunity for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Jerry Hodgson. I'm an architect and urban planner, and as the chairman has pointed out, I was a member of this council for 2 terms. I want to make it clear that I wish to support the revocation of the reserve on this area. I would go further and revoke all the land on Marine Park except for a strip of land on the harbour on the western edge, which, near the naturally formed beach. That's your natural reserve for your dog walkers, your cyclists and so on, your picnickers, thus retaining Marine Park on the harbour's edge and freeing up all the land for urban use, such as this university. The city does not need a huge park in this position. What it needs to do is grasp every opportunity to use valuable land close to the city centre for necessary urban uses, such as this proposal for an educational facility. This land is very valuable. I've got it on good authority. It's worth $10,000 a square metre. We're talking $250 million. It's nothing. It's $250 million in value. Councillors, you have a duty to use that resource. This land needs planning now to meet the needs of an important growing city. Part of that planning is to establish constraints on future projects that make the best use of this valuable land, $250 million worth. Best use, I would urge, is the maximum use of the land by constraining users to higher density use. Someone said a few minutes ago that it's almost saturated. That is completely wrong. It's empty. In other words, to require taller, denser buildings to enable that multi-use and efficient planning. Car parking is not an efficient use here, and one constraint would be to require projects to include car parking in one or more stories. Low-density cities are the most inefficient and the most costly. It's costly to service infrastructure such as roads and essential services in lower density developments. Lower density planning creates congestion, air pollution. It's an inefficient use of time. You're obliged by the RMA to actually conserve resources such as this land, to conserve it, to use it to the best use. Please reconsider this proposal by initiating planning of the whole of the Sulphur Point, as I urged Council to do in my submission last year. Establish the best use of this valuable land. Lay down constraints such as uses, density, height, car parking, urban uses, levies and so on. And in order to facilitate this, you should employ an urban planning panel of experts to advise you. You don't have such at the moment. Cease any negation with third parties such as the university and the marina and anyone else until the actual needs of the city are established. I would expect that you would say the actual needs of the city is more land for residential, not recreation. Page 2, previous planning at Sulphur Point. The very existence of this 80 hectares reclamation was an initiative of the Tauranga Harbour Board, who were dredging it at the harbour for the port and needed a use for the dredged material. On my pointing out in 1974 to the Tauranga City Council that this was a rather selfish use of the land for the Harbour Board right at the city's front door. Of course, the planning authority was the then Tauranga County, so the city had no say in this, but should have. So the Harbour Board wanted to use this new land for industrial purposes. So accordingly, when I was voted onto the council, quite soon I asked the Tauranga City to initiate discussion with the Harbour Board and the county as to what's the best use of this land. And 4 years later was agreed by all those three bodies that a large portion of that reclamation should not be industrial, be underlying purposes, port purposes, but it should be used for urban purposes. I think it's an urban myth for people to say that it's set aside for recreation. That's incidental. It's set aside for urban purposes. So the planning and the eventual construction of Sulphur Point continued successfully to give the city a yacht club, a fishing club, various marine-based clubs, shops, cafes, restaurants, apartments, boat storage, rescue service, and many other facilities, which in my view was a very good outcome. That was what I visualised when I put to the City Council that this should not be used for Industrial B. Industrial B was underlined at that time by Fletcher Steel putting up the ugliest building they could possibly find, and people say, is that what's going on now, reclamation? I think Fletcher Steel did the city quite a service. So on page 2, you can see my drawing of 1974, published in the Bay of Plenty Times, and probably got my seat on the council. But you'll see that I was rather generous, with 2/3 of the reclamation being used for urban purposes, mostly for residential, but also for schools, halls, and all sorts of other things. I got my way because at least 1/3 of it was put aside in the subsequent planning up until 1981, when the land was formally vested in Tauranga City. Just as a little sideline, on page 3, the Marine Research Facility. I believe that a research facility would be an asset to the city and support its endeavours to make it happen. Interestingly enough, in 2002, the university commissioned me to design an urban, the building for the marine research, and you can see my endeavours are shown on the bottom. And if you have a look at page 1, you can see that in 2002, the piece of land that the City Council had discussed with the university was nowhere near the present proposal. You can see it's way over on the eastern part, right hard up against the port. And it was to be shared by the regional council as well. So my design had a nice wavy roof on it, and I think it would have been a beautiful piece of urban design. But I say that with all due modesty. But in 2019, my approach, if asked, would be different. I would build a taller building and site it in an alternative site on the water's edge. Again, referring to page 1, I would put it, a tall building, 8, maybe 9 stories high, more space than they may require, except for future uses, hard up against the launch pad that's already there. I would suggest they have a wet basement. In other words, they could put their research craft directly into their building. And it would not need dedicated car parking, because there's a huge amount of car parking. When we were talking about this in 74, 75, 76, 78, we never envisaged that half of that area would be used for car parking. But that's the situation now. It's so wrong. Finally, on my last page, I entitled this Sulphur Point Opportunity, and that's exactly how I entitled the plan I drew in 74 and submitted to the people of Tauranga. Here's an opportunity. Convert this into urban uses, not industrial B. I'm saying now in 2019, the opportunity now is to successfully grasp this is you, the Tauranga City Council, and use it for multi-urban uses, such as an international hotel, such as a university facility, such as residential, such as commercial, professional. Don't combine it, don't stick at 2 stories, go to 18 or 19 stories. This is really an extension of the CBD. It is so beautifully placed. There's also another thing that has constrained the council over many, many years, and that is NIMBY. There's no NIMBYism needed here. The port would support this. The port is the only neighbour. So you have it in your hands to actually make this an urban centre to be proud of. So finally, my bullet points at the bottom would be to revoke the reserve status of most of the marine park, but preserve marine park on a strip along the harbour. Tauranga would thank you for it. Plan the area, that is, go through the process in the RMA and appoint a design panel of architects, engineers, and urban planners, because at the moment you're lost. You don't know what you're doing. You're planning this piecemeal. Anyone that knocks on your door says, can we have a piece of this? You say, you need a plan behind you. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Any questions, colleagues? No, there being none. Thank you for your submission. We'll be deliberating after the hearings in July.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Daryl Hine. Daryl's submission is on page 23 of our agenda. Sir, you've requested 5 minutes, and you can use that as you wish, but if you finish a bit earlier, there may be the opportunity for some questions.
Okay,
Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, so my name's Darryl Hine. I'm a local resident of Otamotai. I may not be speaking exactly on my submission, but it's my basis is I'm against the revocation of the reserve status for the following reasons. I believe with the growth that Tauranga has already experienced and the forthcoming growth, particularly in the central city, it would be madness to get rid of what's a very limited amount of green space. It's also pretty much the last bit of green space left with deep water access next to it and all tide access. I would submit that there's plenty of commercial land, including the land that the university already has a research facility on. If they need a new facility, I would imagine they could redo that or something very similar to it. There's also land along Dive Crescent which is underutilised, which would be a really nice add-in to the central city if the research facility was placed there. A lot of people say that the land is underused at the moment with just a few dog walkers and things. That's correct at the moment, but if the city grows, doubles in size in the next 30 or 40 years, it's going to be really important to keep it there. The area is also very popular for the fishing community and many water-based sports, and it'll be a shame to lose the access and to that area for future growth. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the submission. Are there any questions, colleagues? No, thank you very much. That was clear and to the point. Thank you. Our next submitter, colleagues, is Mayor Gary Webber, representing the Western Bay of Plenty District Council submission. Mayor Webber. And Gary Ellis as well. Thank you. Please come forward. Welcome, Your Worship, and 10 minutes is what you've asked to be allocated, and if you finish a little earlier, my colleagues may wish to ask you some questions. So over to you.
Thank you. Mayor Greg, Chair Steve, councillors, staff, members of the public, thanks for the opportunity. Yes, we were previously the county as well, so it's been an interesting place to listen for a short while. We do not oppose the facility as such. It is the placement of it, and I refer to the second page of our document, point 2, that TCC, Western Bay of Plenty District Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council undertake a joint harbour access. That's where we're really coming from, and I'll let Mr. Ellis take you through the real points that we're focusing on.
Thanks. Good afternoon. So probably the point we're trying to make is that there's pressure on harbour access within the sub-region for Tauranga Harbour. And we're proposing, we've actually commenced a joint three-way harbour access study. The first range part of that is the stock take and assessment, and it's really looking at where there is current boat ramps, what the parking availability is, where it's deep water access, and looking at future demand. And given the 100,000 plus growth in the region, plus the growth in the Waikato, we can see the requirement for boat trailer parking in this location doubling. And with that as a very desktop assessment, we believe that it's possibly slightly early to make the decision on siting the marine facility there because it compromises the future availability of the boat and trailer parking. If you're looking at the current, I guess, boats per head of population ratios, and with those numbers you're going to double the number of boats. You get a lot more watercraft, you get a big upsurge in jet skis. All of them require this type of facility and deep water access. Part of the study is also looking at the, I guess, more informal opportunities, kayak launching, etc. So we're not counting that, it's merely those boats that are on trailers. And as Mayor Gary said, we support the facility, but the location and the timing is what we're questioning in terms of this decision.
Sorry, has that concluded the submission? Thank you. Colleagues, any questions of Mayor Weber or Mr. Ellis? Councillor Malloy.
One of the issues that is coming up and is going to come up with regard to the balance of the uses that are wanted and other deep water activity around the harbour, has Western Bay identified other possibilities for deep water launches around the harbour and activity for boat marinas possibly?
Within our planning, we've been looking for a number of years at deep water access for two locations. So one is on Mokoroa, and the demand there relates to the 2,000 to 12,000 population increase. While there is deep water access there, the on-land parking ability is already constrained. You have the Matakana on a ferry there that has demand for there. So while we have deep water access there, we've got issues with the on-land component. In the Northern Harbour, which again, I guess services our population, we've been looking for a number of years, and every site we've looked at has constraints, whether it's requiring dredging, and we need to go through a consent and consultation process for that, or again, somewhere like Tanner's Point, there's not sufficient land to actually park the vehicles. So when in looking at it, as I said before, it's not just the ramp and the deep water, it's also what you've got that goes with it. Part of the proposal, part of the exercise is looking at the Regional Council, the coastal plan rules, because at the moment reclamation for parking is a prohibited activity, where if it's linked to a boat ramp, I'd suggest that that might be something that could be considered, and that would help solve some of the water access problems.
I can just add, we've been collectively between the three councils looking at deep water access, and that's the big issue. Mokoroa is fine, as is Te Puna, you can get, but then you've got a long trek at low tide to get down to where most people want to go to. So the big issue, and just reiterating the point, is the parking that is required for those vehicles, the vehicle and the trailer, is where we're coming up against it. And we've got an ideal opportunity here to possibly accommodate that, because it's got easy access out through the entrance.
Councillor Baldock.
Do you accept that there's another constraint, which I don't think any submitter has raised in the written ones that I've seen, but with Sulphur Point, is that with the trains, as you know, Gary, the increased capacity, particularly to the container side, that there is going to be a situation where you have more and more trailer vehicles going down there with a queue all the way back to who knows where and getting out again when trains are just blocking that crossroad for considerable time. So there's more restraints than just the land for parking, but the access to it as well.
Agree with you completely. But the issue is the regional policy statement says reclamation. You know, we would love to reclaim a lot of land in Amakoroa, but the regional policy statement, as Gary just said, prohibits that. So we're between a rock and a hard place. We have these people wanting access to deep water for boating facilities, but we've got other rules which says you can't do it sensibly. So this is an area where we already see is a possibility. Understand there are those other things that come with it, but at least it's there now.
Agree, we have to find other locations, don't we?
Perhaps to add to that too is that as a regular user of that ramp in a personal capacity, yes, the trains do hold up the flow, but it's not, I've never seen queuing right out to Crossroads. So I think that component's manageable, and the usage of the ramp, it's not all in one point, it's spread through the day.
With the tsunami of bottled water and kiwi fruit going on to trains, you know, we haven't seen yet another sort of 14 trains a day as long as, you know.
That's correct, and there's potential, I guess, to manage that, given that the peak recreational usage tends to be Saturday and Sunday mornings plus some evenings, compared to when the freight movement on the rail is 24/7.
Thank you for the submission, and again, my compliments on the Omokoroa boat ramp. That's a fantastic facility, and also very forgiving if you happen to be slightly misaligned. So thank you. Thank you for the submission. Our next submitter, colleagues, is Nigel Tutt. Mr. Tutt's submission is on page 16 of our agenda. Nigel, is your submission a personal submission or on behalf of Priority 1?
It's on behalf of Priority 1.
Okay, so yes, the 10 minutes is yours to use as you choose, and you're very familiar with the questions that may come afterwards.
Yep.
Thank you.
Got it. So very good to see both councils working together on regional infrastructure. Should be encouraged. Hey, you've heard me talk quite a bit about the Coastal Marine Field Station extension. I've in the past quantified the economic benefits of the facility and the benefits to the local business community. While they are significant and compelling, I'm going to assume that for now that those discussions are remembered and understood, and I would like to talk about environmental sustainability and how we feel around the economy and this facility in particular, I guess, role in that in the future. And that is really, really important to us, right? This is a kind of 50 to 100 year decision. And your decisions really is about whether you take a piece of public reserve land and convert it into something that's used for something else. Our view is that you would be taking something that's used for public good and be putting it into something that is a far better use for the public, would have a wider impact and would touch many more people. It's be a really reasonable decision to crack ahead with this, and also consistent with the previous discussions that we've had where we effectively took another site and said, no, this one is better, so we'll look at this. So effectively you get to change this into a piece of land that would benefit, from what I can see, pretty much our entire community. It will also benefit New Zealand, potentially benefit some areas in the world. And I guess it's all about impact, right? So how would we have an impact here? Well, certainly environmentally, this type of asset is really important to us. So we have, and I'm assuming most of the submitters here are recreational users. It's a very, very busy harbour from a recreational point of view. It's very busy from a business point of view. And it's also a very clean harbour as well, and that's no accident. And you need facilities like this to ensure that you can have that. We're a base for biosecurity here. That biosecurity effort works very well in the water, but I'd also like to just call out that it works really well out of the water too. So some of the work they do, particularly around PSA and horticulture, is really important as well. So regional assets do pay dividends, and if we looked at the harbour and horticulture, we would hit a lot of citizens around here. They also do a lot around climate change research and are a base for that. You may or may not be aware that White Island, due to its acidification of the ocean and easy access, is a really good place to research. So again, right on our doorstep. And they also do a lot around bioremediation and restoration. A number of programs going on there that are very exciting and of course have a lot of impact. That ranges from the use of algae in rivers to I guess, take out nutrients. They also did great work on the Rena, which has paid dividends for this region. And they also restore pippy beds after dredging. So lots of good uses around bioremediation and restoration. And I guess our view is that if you've got great research going on, it's of huge value to the people of this region to have it right here. These are all very smart people. There's lots of research going on, lots of money poured into that gets to be spent in this region on projects that are very real to this region. And if we look at our lovely harbour and all of the people that want to use this facility and the boat ramps and the likes, you've got to have a clean, well looked after harbour to do that. And we have a golden opportunity here with a facility like this to ensure that our future is well looked after. Lastly, I'd also like to emphasise that, well, two things, right? So by having this here, you get to engage youth in this type of thing. And we want youth moving into STEM subjects and creating value. And we really want is for them to have something that's got a purpose, right? So your decision here is, do we engage youth in things like marine research, which is very purposeful, impactful, affects future generations, or do you train them up in computer science and they get to give Google a few more clicks, right? Which is the better option? Also, there is a real need to expand this facility. We all know that. They're full to the brim at the moment. They're absolutely chocker, and they're not a big commercial organisation that has many sites to pick from. They can't go out to Taurika or Rangiuru and pick a site. They must have one that's close to the water and has all the attributes that this one does. So, sum up, we view this decision for this piece of land for the Coastal Marine Field Station as an entirely logical and intelligent decision, and we think that's well founded in terms of economic benefits, social benefits and environmental benefits. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tutt, for the submission. Are there any questions? Councillor Baldock.
Two quick ones, if I may. Some submitters have said they have the alternative facilities where they currently are, where they could expand and develop. Are you aware of why that's not considered an option for the university to stay on the site but just expand there?
Alistair will be able to answer this much more eloquently than I can, but I understand the university has a bunch of capital that they can expend on a facility like this, but if they were to take a larger operating lease, that would obviously affect their financials. And secondly, I heard on national radio just the other day when they're talking about marine reserves down the South Island that recreational fishers were saying that their greatest threat, they considered their greatest threat was sedimentation to the ocean from land development and stuff. Do the research facility look into remediation of that as well? Do you know? All I know is that the Port of Tauranga and the Coastal Marine Field Station, along with some students, did certainly do a lot of research around the dredging and the likes. Yeah, and I think they've got a good partnership with local business around that for the benefit of the community.
Councillor Malloy.
Nigel, I don't think there's anybody here from the university, so well, you can probably answer this. Though the universities take a fair amount of money to run and build and grow, is the university a commercial operation, or is it primarily a service like a non-profit?
Thanks, Terry. It is not a commercial operation. They can only make a certain amount. I think it's 3%, which represents their cost of capital. Yeah, so they're definitely not a commercial operation.
Councillor Mason, then Robson.
Thanks for the presentation, Nigel. What you understand would be the wider benefits to iwi economy and environment ethos?
Oh, there's a few, Max. I think, I mean, if you look at restoration of the pippy beds, it's a good one. That's I guess, a good example of, local iwi and hapu working alongside business to achieve good outcomes. I think more important, the bit that I would see as more important is we traditionally find it difficult to engage Māori youth in STEM subjects. and they tend to be quite interested though in marine, and obviously the harbour is quite a big thing and easy to resonate with. So I think anything we can do to improve education along that lines will hopefully help us to engage more Māori youth in science subjects, get more skills, and hopefully earn more money and have better communities.
Councillor Robson.
Again, a clarification, if I may. You alluded to, in response to Councillor Baldock's question, that the cost of an operating lease for a larger facility would compromise. What we're saying is that the University of Waikato needs subsidy for this Marine Research Centre to exist. I'm not clear what you meant by saying and mentioning the operating lease, and it seemed to suggest that this thing wasn't commercially viable unless it got its land for free or something. Is that where you were going with that?
No, it was not. So my understanding of how, so again, this is the university's domain, not mine. I only know a little bit. So I would imagine if the current landowner develops it, he'll obviously charge the university a high portion in terms of lease. The university has a constricted operating budget, but they do have an amount of capital that they can access. So if they deploy capital on this piece of land, then it becomes much easier for them to stack that up. So obviously if they did that, then that wouldn't hit their operating statement.
Thank you, Mr. Tunt. We are running a bit late, but if it's
Just
brief one.
quickly, my experience in this field, which is significant, is that large capital expenditure has significant operating cost implications. I'm struggling to see how one can divorce the two, but I'll ponder on that.
Again, I'm not the expert on their financial situation, but I would imagine you would deploy that. The cost of capital would be low because they don't have that money now, and depreciation on land and buildings is also fairly low. So to me, it'd probably work out.
Thank you. Our next submitter, thank you for the submission, Mr. Tutt. The next submitter is Roy. Forgive me, Roy, I'm struggling to pronounce your last name. That's my fault, not yours. Machen, there we go. Fantastic, fantastic. You've asked for 5 minutes. If you finish a little earlier, there may be an opportunity for questions. Over to you, sir.
Now it's 120,000, 6 times as many, no more reserve land. One of its biggest assets for anybody that lives, and this is why people come to live here, is the water. The harbour, outside the harbour, boating, yachting, fishing, skiing, all need to bring a car down or a boat, launch the boat, park the car on the trailer. I was down there 2 or 3 weeks ago. That car park was chock-a-block. The overflow car park was about 1/3 full. How can you destroy it or destroy some of it? These people want to come in here, and I've nothing against it, just the location. They want to come in here. In that plan, they have their own piece of car parking space. Everybody else has to fight for a park. Theirs is delegated. At the weekend, when the parking is needed most, their little car park will be shut up. If they need it all, there's nothing wrong with it. If it's needed at all, why have they not go somewhere else? Along with the university on Durham Street or a community college. It's been said that they need access to water. That's the dirtiest part of the harbour, next door to a container port. Surely they were better off round Windermere, where they've got access to water, also public transport. I had an occasion to go up there for a function 3 months ago. It took me 40 minutes to get to the main road, and then 1/4 of an hour to get to Pies Bar. Why the hell would anybody want to put a facility there where they know it's going to take 40 minutes every night to get out to the main road? It's diabolical. Unless you put public transport in. And you can't get public transport in there because they never get in, they never get out. A matter of interest, and we're now talking about people using public transport and leaving the car at home. How many of you here have caught a bus today? Anybody? Thank you. Well done, well done. But the rest of you still bring your car. Do you bring public transport? Or walk? Oh, you'll be healthy. But that's the problem. You can't get in and you can't get out there. That land is needed for recreational facilities. I mean, the previous guy that wants to fill it full of hotels and Christ knows what. I suggest, this is you're only a few months away from council elections. And my suggestion is that you wait until the next election and be quite clear what your thoughts are on running this city, what your thoughts are on the reserves, and what your thoughts are on this piece of land, and let people vote accordingly. I think that's about all. I've said my main points anyway. Any questions?
Colleagues, any questions? No. Look, your last name may sound Chinese, sir, but I have to say that's a good, strong northern accent. And, that's fantastic. Well done. Thank you for your submission. We'll be deliberating on the submissions we've heard today on the 3rd of July. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Rob Patterson. Mr. Patterson, if you'd like to come forward. You've got 10 minutes to use as you wish, but if you finish a little earlier, my colleagues may wish to ask you a few questions. Over to you, sir.
That's for the chairman to sign one.
Okay, we all have a copy of the submission. Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
Can you hear me okay there? Fine. This is a submission on the Marine Park Reserve revocation, or the proposal. Rob Patterson, submitter number 465 on page 25 of the agenda. Mr. Chairman and members of the TCC Policy Committee, thank you for the opportunity to present my submission to you on this matter relating to the proposed revocation of Recreational Reserve being part of the TCC Marine Park. My original submission made herein was dated 14th December 2018 and was filed on that date. As usual, I reiterate all I have said in that initial submission. I wonder why it has taken nearly 6 months to get to this point. The proposal itself is embarrassingly short on specifics, details, and the subject land in question effectively cuts right through the middle of the whole Marine Park Reserve, leaving only very little by way of genuine recreation area for public use at the far end. The other end is usually used by fishing people and so forth. Incidentally, the 7,000 square metre revocation area needs to have added to it the overflow parking, or that proposed area for overflow parking, presumably to be sealed in due course. So the actual area being compromised here is more like 14,000 square metres. If this madness was to be seriously considered at all, and it should not be, in my view, then the more appropriate site is down near the enclosed hard stand area in the location of what I'd regard as totem poles circle there, which is poorly maintained, which seems to be described as a Maori navigation circle of some sort, whatever that might be. I might say that I walk this area quite often, perhaps once a month or so, so I know a little bit of what goes on down there. We go out to the marina and walk back, so it's good to see what goes there, and quite often that area is pretty well filled up if there are fishing events or something like that. The main submissions of opposition detailed are fairly damning, and in particular I refer to the following: Jeff Canham, Ron Pinkham, Sue Foster with their references there, Phil Simpson, Gary Webber, Megan Graham, as she's a marine scientist apparently, William Mitchinson, and Kate Green of Forest and Bird, and so forth. You, of course, have these submissions and no doubt have read them and digested them. The Canon submission 431 is voluminous and makes some very good points, as do all the other presenters in opposition. Speaking in support, you really, I guess today have only had Bay Regional Council, Gary Dawson, the CEO of BVL, Andrew von Dadelsteen, BCR councillor, and maybe one or two others, all associated with University of Waikato in various ways. And in the case of Bay Regional Council, it, along with TECT, each invested 15 million in the new Tauranga University, so they clearly have a bias, as does Gary Dawson, CEO of BVL, because the BVL association with the University of Waikato on the Elite Sports Centre, Mount Maunganui. These submissions are tenuous, not robust, could hardly be called dispassionate or objective, more in the nature of touchy-feely assessments. The detrimental features of any revocation are well canvassed by those in opposition, and it's hard to find anything favourable to say about this try-on. How on earth did this thing ever manage to take flight? Who was driving it? And why is the cash-strapped TCC and TCC council staff facilitating it? Presumably at ratepayers' costs. I ask, who else is meeting any of these substantial administrative costs involved? As way of illustration, I have little faith in University of Waikato to deliver outcomes, and as I said, in the very early stages of when this university was mooted, in my view, it should have been under the control of the Tauranga area, and most of the financial input is coming from this area. TECT, Bay Regional Council, in the form of cash and ex-car park land provided by TCC, worth about $5 million for that site. Also looks like TCC recently made a cash grant to Elite Sports for a facility that was supposed to be self-funding. University of Waikato seems to have contributed very little, along with indeterminate Besta Maori interest that's associated with. It is calling the shots at our cost and seems intent on expecting local people to run around and fulfil their wish list at no cost to them. This should always have been a Tauranga Bay of Plenty University run by locals. On the matter of the Elite Sports Centre, I just would like to mention that it is said University of Waikato contributed $1 million and got naming rights in return, but from what I saw recently, this is just a loan, not a contribution to the cost. Am I right about this? I'm just illustrating what the University of Waikato doesn't contribute. There are references to cultural aligned opportunities for Maori building on extensive iwi partnerships developed by the current facility. However, whatever that refers to, and apparently Marine Reserve Park falls within territory of one or two tribes and 3 sub-tribes. Council has sought feedback regarding the site and potential development from these outfits, a process which is still ongoing after nearly 6 months, for heaven's sake. Well, that sort of non-cooperative attitude won't be helpful. It seems to prevail too often, and no doubt has contributed to the delay in hearing these submissions, and can easily be addressed and put to rest by not proceeding with the revocation, application or aberration at all. That, if you don't have that sort of feedback, then it could well hold up what you're looking to do or consider. Consultations, the outcome was 498 respondents, 289 opposed, 209 in favour, that's 58% against 42%. Having regard to submissions in opposition, they all asked the policy committee and then the full council to reject this proposal entirely. If council decide to proceed against the overwhelming weight of evidence, they still have to get this nonsense past the Minister of Conservation, a Green Party person, Mrs Sage, a committed conservationist, good luck with that, and rest assured full representation and opposition will inevitably be made to her as Minister of Conservation. Further costs will be incurred as a result of that, and what I see, it's all the hallmarks of another independent report coming up. It follows that I personally request Council to reject the revocation proposal. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms Patterson. Are there any questions? Councillor Baldock.
Mr Patterson, it seems that you are considering the yellow area there on the map as being required for overflow parking by the university.
No,
that's not the case, is it?
Not necessarily with the university, but you're looking to put it in there as an overflow parking area, as I said.
For recreational boaties, for their trailers and their vehicles. That's the intention there.
Yeah.
That is the intention there for that yellow area.
Well, if that's the intention, you say it's not going to be tied up with this revocation site at all?
No, they have provision within the 7,000 square metres for the parking needed by the university. It's in the
But you're telling me that they're not going to use that overflow parking thing at all. Is that right? Why would you put the parking area up there?
The question, did you think that that was the overflow parking for the university?
I think it's tied up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patterson, for the submission. You're very well practiced, and it's always appreciated to receive a written copy like that, so thank you very much. Our next submitter is Kate Graham, but I don't believe that Kate is here. So that means our final submitter for this afternoon is Mr. Greg Prescott from the Marina Society. Mr. Prescott, you've requested 20 minutes, and that time is yours to use as you see fit. But if you do finish before that time, there may be some questions from my colleagues. Thank you.
Was the submission handed out to? Yep, and it's up on the.
We have a copy of your submission, yes.
Yeah. My name's Greg Prescott, manager of the Tauranga Marina Society in Sulphur Point, and a role I've held since early 2014. My role includes all aspects of marina operations, maintenance, and all the related facilities down at the marina, including the hard stand. And it also covers input into our forward planning and liaison with our members and other interested parties. I know you would have heard from this afternoon from Bill Mitchinson, one of our committee members of the Marina Society, who has described the establishment of the Tauranga Marina back in the 80s. The Bridge Marina on the Mount side of the Harbour Bridge was developed in the late 1990s, and both these marinas operate close to full capacity. The Tauranga Marina has a waiting list of over 250 persons requiring a berth. In recent years, the Marina Society has explored amongst its members the idea of expanding the marina to cater for demand. The proposal to revoke the reserve status of the recreational reserve land to the south of the marina has prompted the Marina Society to consider the implications of the university's plans on the future expansion of the marina. The Society presented to a committee of councillors on several occasions with our initial thoughts for the expansion of the Tauranga Marina. We have also commenced discussions with some stakeholders, including Ngāti Tamarawahu, who support this marina expansion. From our initial engagement with Council, the Marina Society was invited to take a long-term, 50-year view of its development plans and to consider obtaining legal and planning input. The attached, also shown on the overhead, plan outlines a proposed expansion of the existing marina to the south of and into Marine Park. The location of the proposed University of Waikato Marine Centre site is superimposed onto the marina expansion plan for an additional 200 berths, which would cater only for the existing demand. There is a conflict between the proposed location of the university and the only viable development option available to the Marina Society. There are no northern or western expansions options available to the marina at Sulphur Point due to either established built infrastructure or harbour bed features. The only viable option for an extension to the south, which would result in reverting part of the reclamation at Sulphur Point to create the necessary marina berths and manoeuvring waterways. Looking out 50 years in the future, it's hard to predict the needs for recreational boaties in the community, other than the fact that we are in an area of growing population. There are high rates of participation in marine activities and recreation. Society has a current waiting list and expressions of interest for all berths identified in the expansion plan. Further, obtaining any consent for future expansion of the marina will require engagement with council and other stakeholders and resource consent. Extending the marina has significant advantages over creating a new marina in an alternate location. The key advantages are less footprint on the harbour because there would be a reversal in part of the reclamation which established Sulphur Point. uses existing infrastructure and assets, management, buildings, facilities, roads, water structure, etc. Potential for improvements to public access through integrated planning and design, direct and indirect economic benefits to the region, consistent with policies to establish the community to have access to the coast. We know that there are opportunities for better use of space at Sulphur Point and Marine Park. Co-locating and sharing facilities, buildings, etc. have been an issue at Sulphur Point for some time. Not-for-profit clubs will, over time, have difficulties maintaining these buildings, and there are efficiencies in co-locating club activities and sharing operational costs. Further, for trailer boats, vertical stacking is a realistic option to meet the future demand of recreational boating. No one would pretend that a parked vehicle with attached trailer is an efficient use of valuable coastal land. However, once established, the university building will be irreversible and conflicts with the Marina Society's expansion plans. Our suggestion is to work closely with Council, University of Waikato, iwi and other stakeholders to establish a master plan for Sulphur Point Marine Park Reserve. This will assist in proper consideration of spatial needs for the various activities. The potential to co-site clubs and look to further and how to better utilise this existing resource for the Bay of Plenty region to establish a great master plan will need open dialogue about long-term goals and aspirations, as the Marina Society has done with the submission. The Marina Society's request to Council make the most of the opportunity and defer consideration of revocation of the reserve until a master plan has been prepared with a consultation from all stakeholders with a focus on likely future space requirements or consider sites in approximate proximity outside this reserve of land or buildings that are available. Thank you.
Thank you for this. Oh, do you wish to? You can continue if you like. Yes.
Yes, I beg your pardon. Stuart Ryan's my name. I'm a lawyer retained by the Tauranga Marina Society. I'm happy to. I'm sure that you may have some questions for Greg, but I wondered if I could chip in at this point, and you might be able to deal with any questions in respect to both of us. But if I could make the Society's position clear, the Society doesn't oppose the university establishing in the vicinity, but it has an issue with the location because it conflicts in terms of the plan that you have with the only likely expansion opportunity for the marina, which is to the south of the existing marina. And Madam Secretary, I'm not sure if you're able to navigate the diagram on the screen, but it perhaps would be helpful if you were able to just blow that up a bit so that it centres on the red square in the middle. Thanks very much. So as you can see from the plan, the existing marina is to the right-hand side of the plan, and there is an indicative, it's an indicative only, proposed marina which accommodates 200 berths, which is less than the existing demand that Mr. Prescott has set out in terms of existing demand for 250 berths. And on that plan is superimposed the proposed university site. Between the proposed marina site and the existing marina is a hard stand area, and you will have heard earlier today from Mr. Mitchinson, who has a long institutional memory and whose firm was involved in setting up and establishing the Tauranga Marina in the early 1980s. And there is, in fact, a special Act of Parliament called the Sulphur Point Tauranga Harbour Board Empowering Act 1981, which specifically established the ability for the old Harbour Board to reclaim part of the harbour and establish the Sulphur Point area in terms of what you see now as Sulphur Point. And it appears probably from the plans that reclamation started maybe in the early 1900s and continued through this empowering legislation. And that asset was transferred to Tauranga City on amalgamation of councils in the Bay of Plenty in 1989. And through that arrangement, the Tauranga City owns the dry bit, if you like, of the marina. The society owns and manages the wet bit under a management agreement with Tauranga City Council. And the hardstand area that Mr. Prescott has referred to, and which is in the middle of that diagram, effectively services not only the Tauranga community but the whole marine industry, if you like, or marine users in Tauranga Harbour, which the Western Bay of Plenty representatives referred to. If I could just address you very briefly on legal matters, which is my role. The staff report sets out to you, I think at about page 12 or thereabouts, that the Reserves Act is kind of short on detail in terms of express factors for consideration in terms of revocation. It's not a modern statute which says, look, these are the factors that you have to have regard to. So the staff report sets out to you that the decision in terms of revocation has to be made in respect of the purpose of the Act. And I've set out at paragraph 4 of the written submissions that you may have that section 24 outlines the procedural steps, but the detail really is missing in that section, and you have to instead refer back to the purpose. And the purpose in terms of the Reserves Act, which is a basis on which council holds the land and it's vested in council, is amongst other things to provide for the preservation and management of that area for recreational use or potential, whether active recreational use or passive, and also ensuring the preservation of access for the public to and along the coast. And I have referred at paragraph 5 of my submissions to a decision of the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, which just sets out the principle that I've mentioned, that in that case it was a revocation proposed by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council or its investment company over the Ruataniwha Dam, and it set out that the power that in that case for revocation had to be exercised against the purpose of the Act. So that's the substance of the advice that you have from your staff. I agree with that proposition, but I would suggest that the Minister, having been on the tail end of that decision in overturning a decision of the Minister in terms of a revocation in that case, the Minister's advisors are likely to be somewhat wary of making decisions in respect of a revocation if there's evidence that the land in question is still suitable for recreation. So the Society's evidence to you is that, look, its only expansion opportunity is to the south. There's no real opportunity to the north. It's harbour, can't go to the east, it's port. And so if there is to be expansion in the future, then the only viable opportunity is to the south. Now that plan that you have is entirely indicative. The Society has, amongst its own members, been ventilating the idea of expansion for some time. I'm told that there has been a presentation on one or more occasions to councillors in respect of this idea. The Society has been, if you like, compelled by the university's proposals to disclose publicly its idea because otherwise the potential opportunity is lost. But unlike the proposition from you from Mr. Von Dadelson, the Society doesn't wish to be a naysayer. So the proposition is that there is an opportunity here for some good master planning going forward. And without wishing to give you poor planning examples from the Auckland context, you can see around the country that there are marinas like West Haven and maybe down here where kind of these things have evolved over time a little bit higgledy-piggledy, that there've been incremental decision making, and Mr. Prescott has alluded to individual clubs and societies sort of being established and not being co-located in terms of sites. There being better opportunities now for things like vertical stacking, and there are some good modern examples of master planning, like for example, probably Auckland's only one of any quality is the Wynyard Quarter area, where there had been really a kind of an old marine cluster that was effectively brownfields. Part of it was owned by the private sector, and part of it was owned by council. It was all reclamation down there, and the end result, if you've been down to the Wynyard Quarter recently, is a pretty live and enlivening experience. So the Society's proposition would be to agree with what you've heard from the likes of Mr. Hodgson, although perhaps on a different side of the fence, and agree with him and the Western Bay delegation that this is an opportunity for some good master planning in relation to the area, both in terms of Marine Park and Sulphur Point. However, I caution and suggest that there are rocky shoals ahead by reference to the Supreme Court case that I've referred to. If a decision is made to revoke a reserve without clear or compelling evidence that the reserve in question is no longer suitable for recreational use and utilisation. And in my submission, the fact that there's 500 submissions to you on this issue suggests that there's a high degree of interest. Mr. Von Dadelson, I think, referred to the RENA. When that application was notified, there were 150 submissions, I think, at the first instance hearing before the Regional Council. So this is an issue that's attracted a lot of interest. And as I say, I think the Minister's advisors are likely to be somewhat wary. And so the proposition being advanced for the Society is to take the opportunity to explore more closely the opportunity for more efficient utilisation of land down there. The Society thinks that there's some opportunity for better utilisation. Clearly, in a growing city, there's going to be more demand for reserves, not less, in the future. So grasp the nettle now in terms of looking at master planning. The Society's of a mind to advance its plans. It needs time in which to do so, but in my submission, there's opportunity for better utilisation, and the Society would urge that you put on hold the idea of revocation, because based on the existing evidence, it doesn't get over the line, and instead, council is respectfully invited to review the land use, look at the idea of master planning, which a number of submitters have urged on you, and then look at the issue again as to whether these activities can co-locate and fit together in a way that don't crimp one another's expansion opportunities in the future. People have mentioned the space requirements of the university. I note the proposal is for 7,000 square metres of land to be taken, but the building footprint appears to be 2,400. I know it's a concept plan, so there's a balance of 4,800 square metres that are not presumably utilised for building footprint. Even if one assumes that the building footprint is 2,400 square metres at the ground floor, if you've got to 2 or 3 story building. You're talking about 2 stories, 4,800 square metres, 3 stories, 7,200 square metres. This is big footprint. This is a big footprint in that context. So look, those are my submissions. I've set out in writing at paragraph 12 the position for the society. I think I've already made those points to you. The land itself is unique. The resource is finite. It's a big area. Careful design and better master planning in the society's submission is a way forward, but put this on hold in the meantime. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the submission. Mr. Ryan, a couple of questions from me. If we look at the proposed site for revocation, it does appear to be underwater in this proposal. And so I'm sure you'll be familiar with the King Salmon decision back in 2014, I think it was of the Supreme Court. So since that decision, my first question is, are you aware that any consent has been granted or upheld for declamation anywhere in New Zealand, given the duty to avoid? That's my first question.
The way that the regional coastal plan classifies the area, the water area is all an outstanding natural feature and landscape. So there have been a number of canal developments, as you may be aware of, for example, the Hopper developments that have been historically consented as declamations. So the land-based bit would be, at least in terms of the regional mapping, outside of the ONFL. So the restoration, if you like, by declamation is on an initial assessment outside of the outstanding natural feature and landscape area. I should add that so I guess the way that the society would view it is that by taking the opportunity for a declamation, you're, if you like, reversing a reclamation that was previously authorised by Parliament, and the society's at least initial engagement with one of the hapu who has mana whenua status, as Mr. Prescott referred to, indicated a positive reception to that idea. But obviously there's a long journey to go on that course, and the society would need to progress the idea. So, yep.
Thank you. My second question, being again on that site, declamation would entail revocation of the reserve status of some 4 times that site which is proposed at this time. Is that correct? So the society is opposing the revocation of the University of Waikato site, well, proposed site, if I can word it that way, which is on there. But if that proposed marina went ahead, there would have to be a revocation of a site some 4 times larger. Is that correct? Presumably the Marina Society wouldn't oppose that revocation, is that right?
I'm not sure of the answer to that. The use as a marina would still be recreation purposes, so it would fit with the idea of the purpose for which the land is classified. The title would still exist, so there would be a title to land, albeit partially covered by water. In its own little way, council has declaimed part of the area. I know it's a different scale, but declaimed, if you like, the boat ramp area, and would propose to do so again for any expansion for say a second boat ramp. So there's no suggestion there that needs a revocation. I think it's a question that would need exploring with the department.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Clout, do you have a question? Councillor Baldock.
Did for me too, but I'll follow on with another one, that these submissions that we've heard and the written ones we have, quite a few of them are from the boating fraternity who have trailer boats, and they're saying, you know, we can't relinquish that 7,000 square metres because they need overflow parking. They expect there to be expansion. The future boat ramp, when it's put in, would no doubt lead to a lot more. So I imagine if we were sitting here at a future date, and I don't mean we because there's an election coming up, but council was sitting here, we would have an equal number of submissions, I guess, in opposition to your proposals if revocation was required. And I realise you've raised the issue of whether it's clear or not, but so, you know, we could be in the same position, really, couldn't we?
Yeah, look, I agree that this...
By the way. Greg?
Look, certainly there are some challenges in terms of efficient utilisation where you've got a boat and a trailer, and I agree with what the Western Bay Mayor and officer said. There are opportunities for vertical stacking, as Mr Prescott referred to, and I think if Madam Secretary are able to just zoom out a bit, go the other way and reverse out. So there's a boat storage area currently owned by Tauranga City, which coincidentally I understand is 7,000 square metres of land. So that's currently it's opposite the big shed on the left-hand side of that map. So that's currently just in boat storage at grade, owned by council. So there's opportunities for vertical stacking there. The society has ventilated the same idea itself, perhaps on part of the hard stand area. So yes, efficient use of storage is a key issue which would be relevant to a master planning idea if you were to adopt that.
Final question, Councillor Robson.
Again, clarification. Trying to distill the essence of the argument is that, if I'm clear, your advice is that because it's a recreation reserve, revocation will be difficult if you wanted to change the purpose, effectively. That there's, given there is clear demand for a recreational reserve there, your advice is it's a very different question and not one that's come before us today as to which recreation gets dibs on any particular piece of land, but that the issue you're raising is changing the status of recreation reserve when there is clear demand for recreation reserve is likely to be a significant hurdle. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes, that's my view and submission to you.
Okay, thank you for the submission, Mr Prescott and Mr Ryan. That concludes the verbal submissions. We will close this meeting and there will be a new meeting of the Policy Committee to deliberate on the 3rd of July. Thank you, everybody.